Amazing. All right, so I think there are like something in the lines of 17 slides. Gonna be hopefully a crisp, a very direct session. If you have any questions at any point, ask it out. If I'm going too fast, put it in the chat that you know what, Ansha, going too fast. So don't do that, right? I really like it. So I'll be working on my PPT. So I really like it if like there's a message like that in the chat, someone can mention it to me and say. And yeah, if I'm not audible, just call me out in that. Okay, great. Before I start, I would like to present my immense gratitude towards Tripti Joshi, who is a member of the choir collective Shaheed Bhagat Singh College, who made this very PPT, who conducted this session with the members of QFC in January. I was very happy and I was quite impressed with their work, with their modalities, and I think it was quite clear. Ergo, I think it's best that I just take up their work and replicate what they said to you, to make it in to make it as comprehensible as possible. So yeah, not a credit ceiling person. Made sure that. Cool. Let's start then. What is consent? Three words: clear, enthusiastic, voluntary. What does clear mean? Clear means that there is no and should be no ambiguity when it comes to a conception of consent. We'll come on these terms again and again later, but have these three terms in mind. Consent needs to be clear, consent needs to be willing, consent needs to be enthusiastic, and consent needs to be voluntary. Right? What do these terms means? We'll come to them later, but understand, but keep these three terms at hold for now. What is consent here right now? We'll deal with two types of consent altogether. Consent when it comes to sexual activity, and consent when it comes to non-sexual activities. Right? The major part and the first part of this presentation will be dealing with sexual consent. And in the end, we'll be dealing with consent outside the bedroom, as termed by Tripti, as in non-sexual consent altogether. All right. So what does clear mean? Many times we get ideas of people saying that, you know what, I want to do this, but I'm not sure, right? It's a maybe. None of those things are consent. We'll come to a glossary later, but at a point, it's not a clear yes. It's not a yes. There is no other idea of consent other than yes. Enthusiastic. Yes can be said in obligation. Consent can seemingly come in obligation, under pressure, under circumstances. That's not consent. Consent needs to be one which comes with pure agency. I don't want someone saying yes to your actions under some pressure, under some obligation. That's not consent. Voluntary. Similar idea. There should not be any burden on them to say yes. Their yes counts only and only when it was a completely free yes. It wasn't under any influence, it wasn't under any pressure, under any power dynamic. And an extension of that. I hope you all can see this, right? You all can. Cool, coherent. Now, apart from these three words, and again, remember, it's not clear or enthusiastic. It's clear plus enthusiastic. Consent constituted by the combination of these two things, these three things, not by one of them. So at a point, it was clear, but let's say it wasn't enthusiastic or it wasn't voluntary, then that's not consent. It needs to be clear and enthusiastic and voluntary. Coherent, there shouldn't be any kind of influence. Very simple. At a point you have any doubts that this person is under any influence, be it of your power, be it of an obligation, be it of any substance, be it even sleep deprivation, then take a step back because that's probably not consent. At a point, this person is not in their senses to give consent to any action, they are not giving consent. And that simply means that you cannot take their yes, even if it's a yes for consent, right? If someone is stumbling, someone can't stand without leaning or something, is slurring, is falling asleep, someone's throwing up, someone's incapacitated, none of that is consent. At a point, they are not conscious. Their yes is not a consent. Even if they are not saying a no, take that as a no and step back. Ongoing. We'll come to this again later, but consent doesn't carry over. Let's say I gave you my consent for a certain action, right? That doesn't mean that I am giving you consent for all the following actions that you will keep on doing. Consent needs to be asked for every action. Whenever you are doing a new action, ask for consent. I gave you consent last week. That doesn't mean I'm consenting to it right now. Consent needs to be repeatedly asked for. Consent is not a permanent thing. Consent is not a contract that I sign and that just keeps on carrying over. Consent is terminal. Consent ends when that action ends or when there is a new action which I haven't consented to, right? Long term relationships do not imply consent. You've known the person forever, you've known you have a bond, doesn't justify anything. If it's a stranger, if it's someone you've known for a while, if it's someone you've been with 10 years, if it's someone you've been with 40 years, consent is still consent. You don't get to assume consent in any possible way. Cool. There is no room for ambiguity or assumptions. At a point, you have even the minutest amount of ambiguity. Step back, clarify. Are you really into this? Do you really want to do it? Always clarify. Secondly, at a point the person is not responding, you can't work with acquiescence here. Acquiescence is reluctant agreement. That doesn't work in consent. At a point that person hasn't said a yes, there is no yes, there is no consent. Step back, give them their time, just stop. Don't do anything. Coercion is not consent in any way. If you feel that, reconsider your entire value judgment, reconsider your morality altogether. You can't coerce someone into consent. Lastly, and this goes for people who have to give consent, you do not have to feel obligated to give consent to people. At a point, you have to feel obligated to consent to their actions. At a point, you are doing it to prove your love to them, to prove anything to them. You are not consenting to them. And thereon, you just aren't consenting. All right. This is something often people who have to give consent can determine than someone who is asking for consent, the initiator. What does this mean? As an initiator of consent, you shouldn't be asking, you shouldn't be saying things like, oh, you know what, if you loved me enough, you'd do this. If you cared for me enough, you'd do this. Maybe you aren't attracted to me. Maybe you aren't into me altogether. Maybe you're just not into people like me. Loss is similar hair. Unsure. I'm not going to comment on that. Right? So, yeah, as an initiator, if you're saying all these things, you at the very moment are making their consent void in the sense that no consent can come to that idea. Right? And as someone who has to give consent, your yes is not a consent thereon because you are probably doing it under pressure. Under pressure consent, consent under obligation is not consent. The reason I'm taking these things so slow, the reason I'm repeating things again and again, because I really want this to sink in your heads, right? Someone doesn't owe you a certain action because they love you. Someone doesn't need to prove shit to you. If someone is not saying yes, that doesn't mean that there's a yes. If someone's choosing not to comment, step back, go away. Don't do that thing. It's fine. It's okay. Right? Cool. Empathy and respect. Very simple two ideas. As people who care about other people, you should have these at your very core. And these two ideas form the very two essentials of the entire conversation around consent. What is empathy? Understanding that the other person, is a dynamic person. They are not just your partner, they are just not your friend. They are a lot many things. They have a life. They are going through a lot. Everyone is dealing with a lot of things. Therefore, Even if you are their world, that doesn't mean that they cannot have other priorities. That doesn't mean that they cannot have emotions, right? So put yourself in other person's shoes. That's the best way to understand things. You shouldn't be doing things to other people you wouldn't want done to yourself. As simple as that. If you wouldn't want something to be done to yourself, you are very stupid to want to do it to other people. Genuinely very stupid. Not ridiculing people here, but that's all you are. Respect. Respect other people's boundaries. Respect that they have a dignified life. Respect that they deserve to be in charge of their life. And at a point they are not consenting to things, that's the end of the conversation. A major idea with consent is that consent doesn't come, consent has a period attached to it. A no is a no, as simple as that. If the person has said no, that's the end of it. Don't pressurize them in any way. Don't try to bargain with them. Don't try to persuade them because all those things just take away your respect towards them, just take away your respect towards the very idea of consent. If you're someone who pressurizes people, if you're someone who persuades people at a point they've said no, you're not someone who respects consent. As simple as that. When to ask for consent, when to ask for sexual consent. Now, this is a non-exhaustive list that we made. Let's go through them and maybe you can add other ideas as well. Right? Sexting. Do you want to sext? If and for people, let's say, who want to be able to send random messages to their partners, because many people feel more comfortable in that, ask consent for that. Are you okay with me randomly sending you messages? Right? So many people have this narrative that, you know what, you don't need to ask for my consent all the time. Right? Now, while that should not technically be the case, while consent should not be a mood kill, it's understandable that many people might not be comfortable with that idea. How to navigate that instance in that is how to navigate that. Ask them in a different setup. Are you okay with me randomly sending you texts of sexual nature? If they say a clear, enthusiastic, voluntary yes, then you can do that. But if it's a no, ask them every time. Are you in the zone? Are you in the mood? Do you want to do this right now? If the person says no, take a step back. If they say a very enthusiastic yes, go on. Kissing, touching, before and during sex, right? Before, as in at a point you're initiating intercourse, you need to ask this for this person's clear consent, right? Now you need to be very careful here because asking at the same time determining is also important. Determining what? Is this person in the space to give consent to me? Is this person acting oddly? Is this their unusual behavior? Does this person seem drunk? Does this person seem high? Have they had any sort of medications which tamper with their ability to decide? Have they not been sleeping well? Have they had a lot of stress right now? Right? Just a sec. All right. Um, just a sec. I think just a sec. Okay. Hi, sorry. I think I'm in my room actually now, so you won't be able to see me, but I hope you can hear me. Cool. Great. Where were we? Coming to the idea of determining whether consent is something that this person can give is your burden. At the same time, that doesn't mean that you just get to judge them, right? We come, and I want you to keep this thought on hold because we'll come to it later. But again, as simple as that, consent carries on. At a point, this person consented to something, consented to initiation. That doesn't mean that they cannot withdraw their consent throughout the act of sex, right? At any instance, this person can say no. Consent, again, is not permanent. Consent is terminal, and consent is the prerogative, the possession of the person who gives consent, which means that they might have been in the mood right now, earlier, or they might have been okay with certain actions, but they aren't okay with your actions now, and they are withdrawing their consent. Now, the reason why you should be asking for consent every time and not, go with the narrative that, oh, you know what, this person will tell me a no if this person wants to say a no, is because saying a no is often a very courageous thing to do. There are a lot of pressures people are under, right? You are the love of my life. I am not someone who, trigger warning, thought that anyone would love me, but you are there. You matter a lot to me. I care a lot about you. I don't want to lose you. What will you say to other people? All that jazz, right? Then for someone to say no to someone with whom they have an emotional connection to involves a lot of dynamics and can be something that they really need to process before they do. Now, instead of putting them in that position, the better thing to do, obviously, is to ask them, are you okay with this? Do you want to do this? If you haven't said them yes, a clear yes, then stop. Take a step back. It's okay. All right? Cool. How to ask for consent. Where is ways to ask for consent? Can I kiss you? Can I take this off? What about these? Do you want to do this at the very first place? Are you comfortable with me doing this? Do you want me to stop? Right? This is very important as a phrase during sex, particularly. Do you want me to stop? Do you want me to stop doing what I'm doing? Right? Anything and everything needs to be comfortable. How far are you comfortable going tonight? If you are not someone, or let's say if you think that asking for it during sex might be very complicated, right? In addition to doing that, I'm not saying don't do that, but in addition to doing that, you can ask them before sex altogether, right? What all things are you comfortable doing right now? Is there anything you aren't comfortable with doing at all? I know this might be getting really heavy to process, so that's that. But again, the point is that warnings here won't really do much because this entire workshop will have warnings. Okay? So, yeah, a very, very important note, asking for consent is not a mood killer, right? But at the same time, for people who think it's not necessary, I am not invalidating their emotions either. But as an initiator, you most certainly should not be feeling that, you know what, I might ruin the zone, I might ruin the mood if I constantly ask for consent. It is the other person's decision if they find consent to be a mood killer or not. It is not the initiator's decision or burden to care about this thing. If they find you asking for consent repeatedly a mood killer, they'll tell you that. They'll communicate it to you that, okay, you know what, you don't need to do this all the time. For that, ask them for their consent. Ask them if they're okay with you taking up actions without consent, right? Consent can be given for not asking for consent repeatedly. That is something people engage in, but that is something you need to make sure of, right? Communication is never a turn off. Everyone loves for their desires to be communicated, for them to be respected. In my experience, people have found consent. Consent is frankly the sexiest thing out there. At a point, you're someone who respects other people's boundaries. At a point, you're someone who respects them as a human being. For you to understand that they have control on their life, that they have control on their body, I then there is nothing wrong with that. I can understand that how some people might get annoyed by it. That's also valid. But communicate that also. Never assume that, you know what, I'll ruin this person's mood if I just constantly keep on buggering them with consent. Consent is never annoying. It can be annoying for some people, that's valid. But ask for consent in those situations also. The many forms of yes. Yes, I'm sure I want to. Don't stop. I still want to. I want you to do so and so. right? All these are again clear, enthusiastic, and voluntary statements in the context wherein you have absolutely no doubt that this person is under any kind of influence. All right? Many forms of no. The only form of no is not the word no. There are many ways that in which people will want to say no. Again, remember, saying no is quite a big deal. It is an action many people are not comfortable with. It is an action many people don't find the best agency to do. Therefore, if you see any of these statements, it's a no. If it makes them uncomfortable, if there's a but, I want you to, or this feels wrong, I want you, but, right? I don't know. If they don't know what they are doing, then they are not consenting to anything. At a point, this person is telling you that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. There is no way that person is consenting you to do that. There's no way that person is consenting to be in that position altogether. So take a step back, wrap everything up again, let things calm down. Your life is quite long. Things can happen whenever they should happen. So don't worry about that, right? At a point, this person gives you any sort of idea that, you know what, I don't know about this. I don't know if I'm okay with this. Go away. Take a step back. It's fine. It's okay. It's the wise thing to do. It's the better thing to do. I don't think any of you would want to not respect anyone's boundaries over anything else, right? I think all of you prioritize people's boundaries, people's agency, people's dignity the most, and people's control on their life the most. If you aren't that person, again, the door is open, the e door is open, and that e door is that WhatsApp group, right? There's an exit button. If you are someone who doesn't think people should be respected, people's boundaries should be respected, leave the society at this very instance. Um, how to handle a no. Now, this is something many people often have a lot of issues with. That, oh, you know what? How do I handle a no? First things first, repeated statement. Saying a no is an action which takes a lot of emotional investment. That person has already gone through a lot of emotional investment, likely to say no to you. Thereon, you should not be adding up to their emotional chaos. How can you add up to that? By making them feel stupid, by making them feel naive, by making them feel inexperienced for saying no, for listening to their own body, for listening to their own self. If you're someone who has done that in the past, if you're someone who plans to do that in the future, reconsider yourself as a person, right? It irrespective of how much experience they have sexually, irrespective of what they want, if that person is not in the if that person is saying a no, it's a no. And you most certainly do not get to berate a person for listening to their own self. That person is already doing a lot by listening to their agency. The last thing you want to do is to add up another burden on them and to be a jerk. If you're someone who berates people for listening to their own self, if you're someone who berates people for saying no to you, not a good person. Remember, they are not obliged to prove their attraction, love, or commitment to you. It's fine. If they might love you like anything, they might be attracted to you. That does not mean that they'll want to have sex with you all the time, 24/7. Again, they are not just someone who's attracted to you. They have a life. They are a dynamic person, which simply means that there are several factors which affects their decision, and you should not be reducing them to only someone who has to care about you. They have to care about themselves as well. They have to care about a lot of things. So stop thinking on those lines. Moreover, understand that it might not be about you at the very first place. They might be having some personal issues. They might be having some family issues. Right? They might be really stressed about an interview or anything. They might just not be feeling good. They might not be feeling well physically, mentally, emotionally. Right? There's a high chance that them saying no to you does not go on to say that they aren't attracted to you or anything. There's a high chance that there are several other things which are affecting their decisions. Or maybe it is about you. Maybe you have done a behavior, an action which made them feel uncomfortable, which turned them off, right? What to do in those instances? Take a step back, reassess your own behavior. Have you done anything which you think has a possibility of violating them, of affecting them, of making them uncomfortable, right? If you, let's say, aren't able to detect any of those things, eventually, not immediately, eventually, at a point, both of you are, let's say, in a calm position, seek answers to them respectfully and politely, right? Take a break, give them some time, give them a break. This person just said no to you, give them a break, right? And then ask them eventually that, okay, do you want to talk about it? Do you feel comfortable talking about it? Remember that you are the one requesting an explanation, not demanding one here. You don't get to ask them, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, you know what, why can't you tell me and all that shit? That's not how it works. Ask them, are you comfortable talking about it? Do you mind telling me where I went wrong? And basically in a respectful, in a polite way. At the same time, if they don't want to give an answer to you, that's not their burden. They don't owe you explanations. It was your burden to be careful. It is not their burden to go through that discomfort and then tell you how you made them uncomfortable. That's your burden, that's your duty. It is not something they have any sort of obligation to do. Consent checklist. This is going to be slightly longer. Consent has the aim. Have we made consent the explicit aim of our interaction? Have we made sure that everything we have been doing had explicit consent? Have we made sure that there was no instance wherein non consensual things happened? Informed consent. Is everyone fully informed about what's being asked for? Right? Many people use euphemisms, for sexual actions, right? There are several slangs which exist out there which might not be accessible to everyone. I don't know a lot of sexual actions, case slangs. So at a point, in that sense, it's your burden to clarify to me what exactly are you asking from me. Because let's say if I agreed to something, I did not, that I interpreted in another way when you actually meant something else, and that's not consent either. It is your burden to inform the person of what you're asking for, what is expected out of them, right? And what are you going to do? If then, at a point, you have ensured that you have left no space for clarity, for confusion or ambiguity, and you have clarified things in every possible way, if it's an enthusiastic yes, then it is consent. It is then informed consent. Otherwise, in any other position, it is uninformed consent. Ongoing consent. Was consent there before we started? Has consent there been throughout? Is consent there afterwards as well? At a point you go to bed, at a point you have sex with someone else, right? I like to think of it in this way. Even if it's two people, three entities are involved in sex: you, the other person, and both of your consent. Which means that consent needs to be involved in in that action throughout, right? Consent cannot be out of the sexual space. Consent cannot be missing in the sexual space. You always need to invite consent to the action. Relational consent. Is this a relational interaction where everyone can bring their needs, limits, wants, boundaries to the table? Relational consent, I'll explain later more, but think of it in this sense. Are you both equals? Is this really a dynamic wherein both of you can bring up consent equally? At a point, you realize that this is not that dynamic. Be more careful. Ask for that person's consent. Make sure that they do not feel under any pressure or anything. Consent and wanting. Are people able to clearly in quotes, express and be heard about what they want and what they don't want, and what they consent to and don't consent to? At a point, this is missing. There is a high chance that you are engaging into something that's non-consensual. I'll skip the multiple options while idea. We'll come to that later. But think of The last two ideas, power awareness and accountability. Are we aware of our cultural and personal power that imbalances our relationship between that our relationship with that person, and the potential impact for that person to feel free enough to say no to me in any possible way? Does Is there a reason why this person might think of me as a more powerful person? Can that make this person feel like that they do not have agency over me? If that is the case, if you are able to determine that, clarify, communicate, and be more careful. At a point, there is a power dynamics, and power dynamics are usually existing in most relationships of sexual nature. Be more responsible. Power needs to be accompanied with responsibility here. If you have more power, take up the greater responsibility to clarify with this person and to constantly ask for this person's consent. Lastly, accountability. We need to keep ourselves accountable as initiators. Have I done anything that is non consensual? Right? Have I done anything wherein I think I might have violated consent? Right? If you have in the past, try to reach out to that person, try to hear what impact you had on them, and offer to make reparations. At the same time, if this person says no, then that's a no. It is not the burden of someone to whom you are apologizing to comfort you. Think about this, right? You did something wrong which affected them. Now you're apologizing, and then you expect them to comfort you also. Someone who already was wronged now has another burden to comfort the person who wronged them. That just doesn't make sense. If they feel comfortable talking to you, cool, that's great. If they don't, take a step back because you are doing more harm right now. Coming to the default script and power dynamics, right? Now, all of us have a default script in our heads, how we want life to work, how we want things to happen. You plan, Valentine's Day is coming up, right? You plan your date, right? You have all sorts of ideas, what things will go like this. You have such plans whatsoever. Understand the fact that the world doesn't revolve around you, that this is not your dreamland. You are in real world. You don't get to control how things work here, which means that there's a high possibility that things will not work as per your script, that things will go differently. Now it is up. Now think of this as the trade off. What do you value more? Do you value your script more than someone's agency? If you are someone who does that, reconsider everything. Your plans, your dreams, which have impacts on other people, do not matter more than their agency to decide how things go with them. Do not matter more than their comfort. It is okay if your date night did not go as you planned. It is not okay if you ended up having, if you, it is not okay if you ended up emotionally scarring someone else. All right. Coming to power dynamics, age differences, and sexual experience. Older people and more sexually experienced people tend to have an age dynamic, and younger people therefore feel that they feel the need to prove themselves that we are equally mature, we are equally experienced. Everyone desires to be in an equal relationship. No one likes to feel like an inferior. So thereon, as the older and the more experienced person, it is your burden to communicate this to them that they do not have to do anything to prove things to you. This is not a competition, right? You are in the same team. You are not fighting against each other. You are with them, you are there for them, and there is nothing they need to do which they do not want to do to prove anything to you. There's a very high chance that they are feeling inferior to you, and that is affecting their decisions. In that sense, take a step back, navigate things in a more responsible way. Ask them if they truly want to do this, if they're truly interested in something like this, or if there is some other motivation behind this. And these things should not only happen particularly in power dynamics, only when you're asking for consent. These conversations should happen other than instances of sexual consent also, right? Clarify it to them repeatedly in whichever way you think is best, that there is genuine, that you are there for them. They do not have to do anything to prove anything to you. Level of ability, right? Now, many of us have abled bodies. Many of us are people who require assistance. Just a sec. Yeah, sorry. The cons of living in your home and attending such things. Okay. At a point, you are making decisions for other people. I will not spend a lot of time on this because this is not my story and or my place to comment on this. But understand that there are several things that you have to navigate within terms of abilities. At a point, you are directing them in any possible way. You need to be more responsible. It's as simple as that. At a point, you have more capital than someone, then you need to be more responsible. You need to be more careful of your actions, and you need to be extremely and exceedingly empathetic towards them. Privilege and position in society. Someone may have social privilege than their partner. Education, job, wealth, caste, race, factors, any factor. Your money, your birth, all these things do influence stuff, right? If you are privileged enough to think that caste doesn't exist, that education, that the school you went to doesn't matter, that the money you make doesn't matter, stop. Because for many people it does. And for many people, it puts them in loop. So again, at a point you have any sort of suspicion that you command more power, command in terms of just a sec. Yeah. Coming to quick reminders, it is the initiator's responsibility. Initiator should have had an apostrophe in it, but that's okay. It is always the initiator's responsibility to seek out consent. A very important remark here, right? This came up in our QSC session that a person mentioned how even the initiator's consent needs to be thought of. What does that mean? Is the initiator always doing it out of enthusiasm and voluntary nature? Or is the initiator solely doing something to please you? Is the initiator feeling under pressure? And are they asking for consent again and again because they're hoping that you say no and they stop? That is not a position you want to be in. Therefore, consent needs to be asked of both the parties, right? As someone who is asking for your consent, do not always assume that you have their consent. Ask them, cool, I am okay with doing this. Do you want to do this or not? Just the fact that they are the initiator does not translate into their consent. Do not get carried away in the heat of the moment. This is the narrative several people give out there. I get it. You all have passionate bodies. Cool. But at the same time, you need to be responsible for that. If you're not someone who can control your bodies, don't do that at the first place. All right? If you're someone who thinks that they will not be responsible for consent in the heat of the moment, take a step back, seek consent before you continue. There is nothing called drunk sex. There's nothing called high sex. There's nothing called sleep deprived sex. Right? A very important clarification here. I am not delegitimizing people who have intercourse while they are not completely conscious. right? How do you navigate that? I'll come to that later. But as simple, remember, if someone is even minutely not completely conscious, their consent doesn't count, right? You do not just don't ask them for consent because their consent is not consent. There is no way it's a yes. Even if this person is saying that it's a yes, they are not completely conscious. They are not in the zone to make sound judgments which they agree with. So don't. Take a step back, ensure that they're at a safe place at a point you really care about the person, and be done with it. That's all. Just ensure their safety and go back. At a point you're someone who finds more pleasure in intercourse when you are um, under the influence of a substance, or be it if you're high, if you are drunk, right, or anything, then consent for that needs to be asked at a point you weren't drunk, right? At a point you were conscious. Give this consent to someone that okay, I am okay with this working while I am not conscious. Right. This is something which can be communicated at a point you are fully conscious, and at a point you are totally fine with this. If you're not, it's totally okay. You do not have to do things that you don't want to. Lastly, very importantly, I will not go into more vivid descriptions of this point, but understand that we don't control our bodies, particularly when it comes around conversations of sex and hormones, right? Sexual behavior, sexual operations are often not in our control, right? People don't control their erections, right? That's not how it works. Which means that someone's body might react otherwise, but that doesn't translate into consent. There's many times this narrative that comes into popular shows that, oh, you know what, you ask someone if you want to have sex, but that person says no, and then the initiator is like, oh, but your body says differently. That's not how it works. It is them who is consenting. Their body doesn't get to have a say in this. So if that person is saying no, irrespective of whatever the fuck their body is doing, it's a no. And you don't really get to humiliate or ridicule the person with any sort of comments. It's their body. They get to decide how things work. If they aren't comfortable, they aren't comfortable. They might seem like they want to do it, it might seem that their body wants to do it, but take consent on verbatim. In such instances, if that person has said a no, it's a no. Take a step back, don't do it. Any questions before this? Anyone who wants any clarifications, confusions, anything? Anyone? Cool. I am guessing it's clear then. Consent outside the bedroom. People aren't Wikipedia. There might be things like human libraries, there might be things like human encyclopedias, but that doesn't mean that humans become your Google. What does that mean? You cannot ask someone personal questions just because you want to know more, right? This is a narrative that queer individuals have to constantly deal with. People randomly ask about people's sexual orientation. People randomly ask whom they're out to. Are you out to your family yet? Trans individuals get this question so many times that, have you transitioned? All of that is invasive. If you want to learn more about bodies, go to Google. There are several manuals out there. There are several first-hand YouTube videos out there which can tell you a lot. It is not people's burden to share their information with you just because you want to learn more about them. Similarly, remain you need to maintain confidentiality. At a point, someone trusted you with something, and at a point, this person did not tell you explicitly that they are okay with you sharing these things with other people. Don't. What does that mean? I shared a particular experience with you. or I shared something that is very personal to me, I never said that, you know what, I am okay with you, let's say, outing me in front of anyone. Irrespective of how comfortable I might be with my identity, with my orientation, at a point I haven't told you that, you know what, you can out me to everyone, you don't out me to everyone. Simple. You ask me, are you okay with, is it okay with, disclosing your identity to this person? This goes with everything out there, right? Being mindful about what you choose to converse about, and respecting the fact that some people just might not feel comfortable in a conversation. Everyone has a lot they navigate with, everyone has a lot of things they have been through, everyone has had different experiences, which means that if someone doesn't want to have a conversation, it is fine, they can exit that conversation. Don't constantly badger people that, no, you talk to me about this, you tell me your opinion on this. I don't want to tell you my opinion on this. That's the end of it. It is not people's burden to tell you their opinions and things. It is not people's burden to constantly talk to you. It is not people's burden to constantly interact with you at a point they don't want to interact with you. This becomes very important in digital interactions. Right. Now there's the obvious stuff. Don't send any sort of mm, triggering stuff without people's consent. Give warnings. Right. Don't send sexual content. Don't send sexual messages until the person has consented to it. But more importantly, realize that you form a part of a person's digital space. What does that mean? Someone might not be comfortable with you constantly occupying their digital space, sending constant memes to people repeatedly. They might have a deadline, they might have an assignment they are due to. They are someone who gets distracted very easily. They don't feel comfortable with you sending your memes constantly. But again, they feel that, you know what, you will ridicule them at a point they say this to you. So, how do you navigate this? Ask someone that, you know what, I'd love to share memes with you, I'd love to share things with you, I'd love to message you a lot. Are you okay with this? Right? This might turn out to be something which makes things awkward in the sense people will be like, okay, why are you even asking this? But trust me, for someone who is not comfortable with repeatedly receiving messages, they'll really appreciate it. Therefore, just ask people, are you okay with me repeatedly sending you messages? Are you okay with me randomly calling you? Right? Many people don't appreciate these things. I know I don't. With most people, right? It's with very few people that I'm okay with, them randomly calling me. Right? Firstly, obviously, let's say if it's, I mean, again, an example can be if anyone from my batch in this room randomly calls me, right? And like, then I will not be having a problem with it, right? But let's say if anyone from your batch randomly calls me, I will not really appreciate it. That's not something I'm a fan of, right? So that's how it works. Ask someone, drop a message. Can I call? Are you free for a call right now? Are you in the zone for a call right now? If they say no, respect the fact. Don't randomly call them and put them in a position to then say no to you when you have called them altogether. अगर तुमने call कर दिया, so obviously then they won't, until they are immensely busy, they will not say no. But the point is that you did end up violating their consent because they never consented to a call at the first place. Cool. Next, hugging. Many people are not comfortable with personal touch. This happens, and a very important remark I remember Tripti gave was that this is something we need to teach our children, like children from the very early age, right? Especially in Indian households, this happens a lot, right? You meet guests, elderly guests, people start squeezing your cheeks. People are like, "Auntie ko hug karo, auntie ke lap pe baitho," whatever. All that jazz doesn't work. Everyone gets to decide whom they want to have in their personal space. You meet a friend, that friend doesn't want to hug you, but your best friends, again, they don't have to hug you to prove to you that, you know what, you matter so much to them. If that is the kind of validation you think works, reconsider, because that's often a burden for other people. And I don't really think you would want to burden the people you love. I, when someone's, I ask people, can I hug you? Are you okay with a hug? If they are, go ahead. If they're not, don't. Don't photograph people without their permission. I get it. It forms really good Finsta pictures. Friends love to do it. Forms very good memories. Right. Finsta or Finsta, I don't know kya hota hai. Something like this term is there. But the point is, all these things don't really work. Right. Or if you think this is something which really means a lot to you, ask that person at another point when they're conscious. Are you okay with me randomly photographing you? If they say yes, cool. If they say no, don't photograph them. Always check in before posting on social media, particularly when you think that there's a high chance this person does not want to put out their picture. Do it always. Ask them, are you okay with me posting this picture on social media? I get it, you all want to give birthday surprises and all that jazz. You want to, give shout outs and everything. It doesn't hurt to ask. Or on another time, ask them, are you okay with me randomly posting any picture of my liking for you on social media? If they're okay with it, they'll tell you. If they're not, don't do that. Expense and budgeting. Remember that people come from different backgrounds. People aren't as rich as you. You might have certain capital with you, people don't. The wise thing to do is whenever you're going out and whenever the expense or money is involved, communicate this. This often happens in group meetings. You go out on here hanging out and shit, right? Communicate it to people that okay, this will be the expense, right? This is the place ka average, amount that they charge. This is what it might come to. Hopefully, is everyone okay with it, right? People might message you personally, or what you can do is not ask this publicly. No, I never ask this publicly. I always message the person. This is going to be the case. Are you comfortable with that? All or give people options from different price ranges. Hi people, hi friends. We have these five options. These are their price ranges. Tell us which one you want. You feel most comfortable going to, right? Remember that person, the people who don't have as much financial capital as you might feel very insecure about that, and they might not feel like they have the agency to tell you that what, I don't want to go there. Therefore it's your burden to navigate this in a way wherein you can really get their consent to something. Lastly, gifting. Don't force people to accept gifts, right? Often with the narrative of gifting comes up a burden that what, they'll have to gift you something. You gave someone a Zara ka coat, they gave you a toffee. That doesn't work, right? But if they can't afford the Zara ka coat, then you should not put them in the position to gift you something at the very first place. This narrative that what, oh, I gave you something, you do not need to give me anything, doesn't work, trust me. Similarly, if you've given someone a gift, it is not necessary that they will use it. It is okay. Give them money instead if you really want to. But the point is, don't force them, don't coerce them into anything. Again, your narratives like, oh, if you liked me enough, or if you actually liked the gift, you would use it. It is evident. If they aren't using it, maybe they don't like it. What other hint do you need? Right. So again, just get the hint, don't coerce them into anything. Be respectful. Relationships are very important, but they're also very fragile. They involve a lot of things. And if you want relationships to last, if you want your bonds to be healthy for both of you need to take them with cognizance. Cool. I think we have a slide here. Yeah. Can you all see it? You can. Yeah. This is a short video which we had.
If you're still struggling with consent, if you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of
Wait a sec. Let me know if it's lagging, okay?
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week, or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
All right. Great. Can you see me now? We can. Yeah, that was the end of it. I'm sorry if it got too slow, too boring, too bland, but I really hope that you got it. You all got the point. And yeah, thoughts, comments, suggestions, whatever, if anyone wants to say anything. Wait, I forgot to show this very important slide. Yeah. Uh, can you see it? Yeah. Um, a major thanks to Tripti basically for doing this session for QFC. I basically took the PPT that she had, and yeah, really thanks to her. We can talk now. I'd love it if people unmute themselves or something like that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, freshers particularly. Some freshers have left. That's very interesting. Uh, Anyone out of the 47 people, out of the people who, again, are not of my batch or senior to me, who have anything to say, people who are in curiosity from this place, I think they've watched this video, like they've been through this already, so I think you knew what was coming. But yeah, people who aren't or anything you want to say. I'm gonna have this stupid mom just cast me. Any comments, anyone?
Yeah, I really liked the session overall. I feel it was something which was quite informative, and given, what has happened, I feel it was something which was like necessary to an extent, because a lot of things which people can confuse as consent, especially when it comes to like the part where you explained when it comes to posting pictures on social media and calling people. I feel those are very small things which people might not take into account. So that was really like beneficial for everyone. Thank you.
Totally agreed. I'm really glad that you had a good time. I agree. I think many people just take these things very casually. You shouldn't, because that's the point, right? That's a major reason why you don't understand the severity of it, because you aren't practicing it in every essence of your life, in every aspect of your life. So have it everywhere. Live a consensual life. Anyone else? Anything?
Thank you,
Uh,
Ansh.
yeah, sorry, go on.
I think this was an amazing session altogether. Not just the things that we were aware of, but the simplicity in which it was explained was tremendous. I think a lot, as of course, as Vrinda said, we take a lot of things for granted, and this was that borderline which was required to be understood by a lot of us. That why is it required at the very first? So yeah, kudos to everyone, and yeah.
It
I
was a
couldn't
very,
agree.
very great session, and especially I loved that video very much. And I think
Same.
everyone should get a chance to watch this session. Very informative, very nice. Thank you.
Agree.
Thank you,
The
Ansh,
way
for this amazing session. And I want to accept that social media picture posting wala thing. I also used to do that, but I'll not do that in future.
Same here, the social media thing. Like, I recently remember I've done it a few days ago only. But yeah, basically, point of learning.
I just wanted to point out one thing, like specifically for like people who indulge in, as they call it, casual relationships, casual equations, and sort of things. Like, one, there's no shame in it, but two, always be cognizant of consent on those like particular equations altogether, because like especially when you're into casual equations, like if you're having sex with people casually and anything related to that, if you consent to something once doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to consent it eventually, as like given out in that particular video. So be cognizant, basically. The moral of this entire session is be cognizant of people's consent and yours as well at the same time.
I totally agree with that. And I agree. So like the credits for making things so simple go to Tripti. That's why I had no shame in asking her for the PPT, because I was like, you know what, I can't make such a simple PPT, such a comprehensible one. I For the ones who have realized how you might have engaged in non-consensual activities earlier, again process that, let that sink in. Maybe talk to the person whom you did something to, right? It's something they mostly are likely to appreciate. We don't address people as guys here. I think what we can do is we can share that pronouns wala PPT with everyone so that people understand. And yeah, don't address people as guys here. Kind of sad what has to get with me comparing to T. True, it is sad that one has to work on anecdotal ideas to make things, trying to simplify things. But it's the reality. And yeah, really hope that you get the idea that if you can understand consent when it comes to tea, then you can understand consent in every possible way. All right. I think we can wait. I think we can stop the recording, right? Cool.